Hi everybody, welcome to something a little bit new. We're gonna try something new today. We're gonna talk about a TTRPG system. It's like an add-on, it's a conversion to D&D's 5e. So, you gotta ask yourself, have you ever wanted to play Star Wars but are afraid of a new dice system? Does your table want to try a new system but the idea of having things be similar sounds awesome to them? Great. I've got a system for you, especially if you play D&D 5e. Star Wars 5e is a community conversion of the 5e system set in the Star Wars universe. The system uses a d20 like 5th edition does and contains variations basically of 5e classes, but with like a Star Wars theme kind of thrown on each of them. Your party can have force users who are basically paladins, fighters, which are good at close range combat. You can have spies and even scholars, which we'll talk about in a bit. System's community made and is free to obtain online, so that's awesome. Very cheap to get into. Resources include a player's handbook, a quote-unquote monster manual called Scum and Villainy. There's a ship rules book called Starships of the Galaxies and a downtime rules book, which is called Wretched Hive. Everything you need info-wise is available for free. There will be links down in the description, which makes barrier to entry for this system very, very low. All you really need is players, maps, and tokens, really. So let's kind of chit chat let's kind of talk over just some stuff about it, what my thoughts are, and we'll kind of dive into some of the material out there, just so you can think about it and maybe choose to play this. So how does it play? Game uses a d20 system, much like 5e, to roll and determine what happens in skill checks, attacks and saves and stuff like that. Basically all the same skills are there. They've just been reskinned. For example, history checks are now called lore checks. They've added some extra stuff as well, like piloting is a thing. Arcana's been dropped for technology. The classes are all basically reskins of 5th edition. So if, like, for example, all the classes that you have in the base player's handbook are, you've got a berserker, which is the paladin. You've got a consular, which is a more force focused like spellcaster, kind of like a wizard or sorcerer, but they can still do a little bit of light melee. You've got an engineer, which is like a support class or artificer. You've got a fighter, which is exactly what it is on the tin. It's a fighter. They're non-force user, ability to use melee weapons and ranged weapons, very good at combat. You've got the Guardian, which is like a more melee-focused force user. Best is it's a paladin, basically. They have the ability to put force power into their like strikes if they're using a vibroblade or lightsaber. You got the Monk, which is a monk. There's a class called Operative, which is kind of like a reskinned rogue. You've got Scholar, which is a support class. I don't think there's really a version of this in 5e other than maybe Bard, but they don't really do Bardic inspiration. Their whole like this thing about giving like advantage to people and assisting with checks and stuff like that. And they kind of follow the Bard terminal like layout by being really, really good at everything, like the whole expertise thing. There's a Scout, which is Ranger, if Rangers are actually pretty good. And then Sentinel, which is a melee focused like force user, but they're really good at both force and melee, not just like better at one or the other. So gotta ask, how easy is this to get into? This is probably one of the easiest systems to get into, both monetarily and in a learning sense, assuming you play 5th edition or have any experience at all with 5th edition. It's a community built game system, so the resources are available online for free. Again, link in the description. Assets include player's handbook, the Scum and Villainy monster manual, Wretched Hives, Starships of the Galaxy. There's expanded content that includes new species. There's archetypes, backgrounds, and starship stats within some of the stuff. There's also what they call sponsored content, which is created by members of their moderation team that have not been officially adopted into the system, but are available for you to use if you want. They've got stuff like PDF character sheets, deployment sheets for starships, and starship quote character sheet. Literally everything you need outside of a book that details the setting in great detail, like a book on Tatooine or something like that, is basically available for you. Again, all this is at the cost for nothing, $0, zilch, nada, completely free. Making it really great to get into if you're not one to pay the cost to get into a new system out there and aren't a fan of like sailing the high seas, as it were. But because it's digital and free, there's no like physical media available, so you would have to print that out yourself if you want it. But what's nice is because it's digital and free, if you do decide to pick it up and play it, there's absolutely no reason anybody at your table can't at least have the player's handbook, like a copy of it on their phone or something like that, which is really, really nice. So how does it compare to Fantasy Flight game Star Wars, which is another Star Wars system. This one varies quite greatly from it. So Fantasy Flight Star Wars uses a D10 system that uses D10s with different symbols on them instead of like numbers to denote what's kind of happening. The system is built in that sense to be more narrative focused. For example, you could roll to say shoot a stormtrooper. Your roll, if it has enough successes to succeed in hitting the trooper, you do, but you could also have failures in that roll as well, resulting in potentially bad stuff happening. Like, yeah, you do hit the trooper, you fire a couple bolts at a trooper, one of them hits and kills him, but then, oh no, you also hit a door panel behind him, which you needed to proceed through, so that shuts the door. FFG's system also has players earning XP like every single session and being able to potentially spend that every session or two on skills, so you like are constantly making progress with your character, but it's kind of slow and little itty bitty bits here and there. Whereas 5e is kind of based on hitting an XP threshold to hit the next level, or like a milestone or something like that, basically to gain an overall level. So it is a little bit different with how your character kind of grows. Recommended ways to potentially play this if you're looking into it. Playing in person is always an option, but arguably it requires more work to make it work, just because there's not like online resources that are there digitally. You have to kind of like physically make them. You have to have like, you know, Stormtrooper tokens and whatnot. This system is available digitally if you're on, like, I think there's a Roll20 option, as well as Foundry VTT, which is how I have personally played it. If you're going to do Foundry VTT, it has been great up until relatively recently, as Foundry has been updating. The person who was updating the Star Wars 5e system within Foundry has not been updating it. No shade being thrown at them. They are literally creating and running this for free, and I will show you guys that in a little bit. The system still works in Foundry, but there may be some hiccups. What's nice about it in Foundry is there's a compendium for items, enemies, and ships and stuff like that. Ships are by far the one thing in the game that really don't have pre-generated stats, and that could be the hardest part of the game to run, to be honest. Otherwise, it's a really great system to allow you to create characters in Foundry, and if you're going to use Foundry, and level them up with a relatively accurate setup. So let's kind of get into some pros and cons. Pros, it is free, so it's super easy and super basic to be able to get into, very cheap. You just need an internet connection. Super similar to 5e, which is awesome. It makes teaching to other people who played 5e so much easier. All the classes are super interesting and very well made and balanced. They added a lot of really nice touches to make all the classes more interesting. Ranger, they made really great fixes to, like 5e Ranger has a lot of issues to it. And the Scout in this one is really, really good. Personally, I love the fact that the Dark and Light Force powers are based on Charisma and Wisdom respectively, and the flavors given to the other classes. The Scholar class is such a cool support class. I can't gush over it enough. It's one of the most interesting support classes I've ever seen in a game, like for any sort of like TTRPG. I love it. What's good about the system too is it is set up in a way that it can be set in basically any time period of Star Wars you want. So you could do Old Republic era, so think like the Knights of the Old Republic games or the Old Republic game, the prequels, so like Clone Wars, stuff like that, or you could do even the original trilogy or sequel trilogy if that even floats your boat. So it's really, really good flexibility. The additional content adds a ton of species. I mean a fuck ton of species, like almost too many species. Like it dwarfs. Like 5e, like normal 5e dwarfs in the number of species available compared to this thing, and we'll show it again in a little bit. Also the additional content adds more subclasses and stuff like that, such as additional ways to play Force users, and it also adds an engineering subclass that allows you to build a droid companion, which is super cool. So cons. It is community made, so there is very limited support for like outside books. So by that I mean like there are third-party made like modules and settings and rule sets and subclasses for that are meant to be played in 5th edition, but add like extra stuff. So like stuff like Delvers, you know, the various like the Critical Role books technically to an extent aren't considered canon but are like in there. Stuff like that. The space combat rules are very confusing, I found, and getting stats for ships is really difficult. It wants you to homebrew the stats, and trying to figure out what should be is kind of a pain in the butt. There are Google Docs out there with access to like ship stats, but they're incomplete, and it's hard to be sitting there reading through an Excel spreadsheet basically while trying to run ship combat. It's very confusing. So personally, when I did ship combat, it was a lot less like battle map stuff. Like most people kind of feel like play 5e, and more theater of the mind with like, I had stuck my players in a freighter. They were flying around like a quasi Millennium Falcon, and was just like, hey, when you use piloting, you're going to roll checks to kind of dodge laser fire and stuff like that. The other players, what gun are you going to be on? You're going to, like, we've got like coming from like 3 o'clock high is a squadron of 3 TIE fighters. Like, what do you do? Kind of stuff. And they just would play it out that way instead of being like on a map. Because like the map would be like hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of feet, because each ship moves like 300 feet around. It gets insanely like how big your maps need to be. Other cons with the game are magic items don't really exist like they do in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But there are ways to kind of enhance weapons and armor in Wretched Hives that can kind of help spice up items potentially if players are interested in that. That really gives a good reason for there to be like a scholar or an engineer character in the party, which is really nice. But like, there's not gonna be like a firebrand sword or, you know, a deck of many things or something like that. Like that really doesn't exist. There is stuff like there's compendiums out there that have like fancy name blasters and whatnot, but it's nowhere near as nice as the DMG is. I am going to jump though into some of the content that's available just so you can kind of see what it is. So we've got a character. So this is like, it comes with stuff like character sheets and stuff like that, which is really nice. This, if you played 5e, this is a very like similar looking character sheet to things you've seen before. You know, you've got your name, you've got the 6 abilities, you've got strength, dex, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. You've got room for place to put like weapons and stuff like that, advantages, resistances, immunities. It does the, you know, the death save system, all that. Where it gets a little interesting is just some of the skills here. So like you've got stuff that you would have normally in 5e, so like athletics, acrobatics, sleight of hand, stealth. But there's some new stuff like lore, which just replaces history. There is piloting, technology, stuff like that. Everything else is basically from 5th edition though. So, but this is like assets that they have available for you. So if you are going to play physically, like there is stuff to kind of help get that written down in a place where, you know, you can have it noted. So this is the player's handbook. And again, this is all community made, which is phenomenal. It's so pretty and well made. You know, it's got tons of information in it. It has a little bit better for you. It's very pretty. It's very easy to read. It's very well organized. Got a ton of interesting classes in it and stuff like that. And this just reads like it's the 5th edition stuff. So it's like very similar in its like tone and layout. You know, it goes through examples of like what combat is and whatnot. There's wonderful art that's included. You could play as droids in this, by the way, which is awesome. They tell you to check with your DM before you play, which is really, really nice because droids are very interesting to have to deal with just because they have kind of like, you know, resistances and weaknesses and stuff like that. But it's got everything you need to kind of run the game here. So scholar, basically huge on being like the pursuit of knowledge. There are subclasses in here, basically really easy. They get expertise, they get maneuvers, which is cool. A lot of the classes get superiority dice. I think the creators really like the superiority dice system from 5e for like fighters and stuff like that. So that's like a thing. A lot of the classes kind of get something like this to use. It's super cool. As you play through it though, but you get like discoveries and whatnot. So you get the ability to critically analyze, which is kind of like an inspiration, but not an inspiration basically. So what you'll do is like you decide to analyze a creature, develop a plan on how best to overcome it, a potential obstacle, or execute a plan ruthlessly. As a bonus action on your turn, you can analyze a creature you can see within 60 feet. For the next minute or until you analyze another target, you gain the following benefits. When you attack it, you use your attack and damage rolls with finesse property, which is kind of cool. You blast weapons against the target may use your critical analysis ability modifier, which is intelligence, instead of strength or dex. When you analyze a friendly creature, the target can end your critical analysis on them to add your critical analysis ability modifier, which is intelligence, to one attack or ability check or saving throw. Cool stuff like that. You get expertise. A lot of really cool skills. These go all the way up to 20. The subclasses are interesting. They get discoveries. So like they're little, almost like warlock invocations. It's just like random little things. There are prerequisites for some of them. So there's stuff like Ambassador. You learn 3 additional languages of your choice. Like, and this class is really meant to be a support class. It's not meant to be sitting there dealing a ton of damage itself. It's meant to be helping your party deal a bunch of damage itself. So there's like cool little discoveries you get to kind of like help and aid your party out. You know, Tech Amateur, you learn and can cast one first level tech power once per long rest. The ability score used is intelligence. You have to use a wrist pad, which is kind of like a spell focus in this. And you can also pick some of these discoveries multiple times. And that thing goes with feats too. And then they have pursuits basically. So these are like your subclasses. So you've got like gambler, which is, you're meant to be like kind of like a non-combat-y gambler. You got physician, so like, party doctor maybe. There's politician, and there's tactician. There's a bunch of other subclasses too in the other book. Talking about like force powers and stuff like that, and tech powers. So like 2 kinds of casting in the game. There's like force powers. So it's gonna be used by your like force sensitive people, and then you have like tech casting, which is going to be for like people who aren't necessarily force users, and it's like to explain how it's basically shovel magic into the game, which is really nice. Like there's a ton of different force powers in this, and they're all very interesting. They are labeled, some of them are dark and light-sided, and they will use those modifiers for casting. So like for example, feedback is a dark side ability. Would use charisma, whereas like guidance or force technique or something like that is considered more light-sided, and you would use wisdom, or like if you have to use any modifiers for that. But these all read like they would for any 5e powers, which is really cool. There's a whole ton of them, which is just shocking for something that's community made. Goes all the way up to 9th level, which is awesome. Tech powers too. So we also have tech powers. These utilize a wrist pad to cast, and basically it's like your non-force sensitive people getting to use stuff. There's acid wind. There's a lot of stuff that is potentially like from 5e that they ported over, and some of it is like newer stuff, which is really nice. It's really cool that they have it though. They're well written. They're really cool. They're really well written. It reads exactly as it would for 5e. I think it's really cool that they have both a force variant of like quote unquote magic, and then a tech casting version of magic as well. Just because it kind of helps push in some of those interesting weapons that are in lore that maybe you want but don't have like access to. So like, flamethrowers and stuff like that, like the wrist pad dart weapons from like Mandalorian and whatnot, like stuff like that. It's really cool that you have the ability to cast that, and it's not labeled like listed to like magic or something. It's labeled as being like a tech item that you utilize to do things with. And I mean, they're very interesting force powers, everything from like healing, like back to pack is cool. You've got ballistic shield, which until the power ends, you have resistance to kinetic energy and ion damage. A lot of these are kind of ported over from what 5e would be in some way, shape, or form. Like back to pack is kind of like a cure wounds, but it's got a 60-foot range instead of touch. And it's a 1d6 plus your tech casting ability modifier, which could be intelligence, or I think it's usually intelligence, but it could be something else depending on what the class is. And a lot of the classes have access to it in some way, shape, or form, which is really nice. Another thing I wanted to kind of chit chat about just randomly that I really like from this is that there are the background system in this, which is like your backgrounds in 5e. They are, it's what you would expect. They do get a feat with them, which I think is really neat. I don't recall a lot of backgrounds in 5e. Maybe the 2024 one changed this, but the 2014 one, you didn't really get a feat. So for example, with the agent, you do get the feature, which is something like a lot of them have, like entertainer background, for example, like would allow you to, when you enter a town or a city, you can, you're more likely to be able to get free or cheaper lodging for yourself and your party because you have the ability to entertain at night at like a local inn or something. So like the agent has a feat called Safe Haven. As a faction agent, you have access to a secret network of supporters and operatives who can provide assistance on your adventures. A set of secret signs and passwords you can use to identify such operatives who can provide you with access to a hidden safe house, free room and board, or assistance in finding information. These agents never risk their lives for you or risk revealing their true identities, and then it comes with a background of some sort. And then of course you've got your personality trait, ideal, bond, and flaw to kind of help you build out a character that is going to be utilizing that. And these are actual feats that do something. So like, for example, let's pull up the Charmer feat. So we have the Charmer feat pulled up here. You've mastered the art of charming those around you, gaining the following benefits: increase your charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20. Proficiency gained in the persuasion skill, excuse me. If you're already proficient, you instead gain expertise. That's another cool thing that this system does, is if you are proficient in something, without having to have expertise tied to your class, you can gain like if you're not a class that gains expertise normally, you can gain expertise in things by taking certain feats and stuff like that. And some of these feats you can take multiple times for either more benefits from them. For example, there is a feat that's meant for like more force users that's called Form Fighter or Form Dabbler or something like that, and basically it gives you more lightsaber forms, which are all these weird things. You usually take like a bonus action or a reaction or something to kind of like slip into that form, and it gives you a benefit for being in that form, and it's supposed to like mimic a certain type of lightsaber combat, which is cool. But you can like take that feat over and over again. Like I had a Guardian PC that took that multiple times throughout the time we were playing it, so they had by the end of the campaign mastered every single lightsaber form. It was wild. They just had this entire list of like 20 plus different lightsaber forms. They were just like, I know them all. I can do this. I studied the blade while you were partying, kind of thing. But these are really nice. Like they're nice features. They give you a nice little ability score increase usually, or like, you know, you get a crawling speed equal to your movement or something. And these are tied to the background, which is cool. Like you could take this if you wanted to at some point down the line, but your background can give you access to it, which is super cool. And I really like. So the feats in this are really, really, really nice. And they give you like, you know, suggested characteristics, flaws, bonds, ideals, etc. to kind of help you build out a character if you're not exactly sure how to build that. And they give you a lot of different feats or backgrounds, excuse me. They give you a lot of different backgrounds to kind of get you to where you want to go. So for example, say you wanted to build a Mandalorian bounty hunter. If you were playing like the Fantasy Flight Games system, you would utilize a class, basically one of the classes, jobs, careers. I think they're called careers in Fantasy Flight's version, but basically your class in that is bounty hunter. It's not something different. So for this one though, you could be a bounty hunter. Like you take that background, which is cool. But you could be like, do I want to be a more like a sneaky beaky hunter, like bounty hunter? Do I want to be like a stealthy assassin? Cool. Pick like the operative or the scout. Do I want to be one that's more like up in front in combat? Maybe more like you would expect a Mandalorian to be? Cool. Pick a fighter. Do I want to be a bounty hunter that's maybe a Sith or a Jedi? You can do that too. So like when you pick the Jedi, when you pick one of the Force based ones, so Guardian, Consular, Sentinel, they will recommend, and they will for some of these classes, they do like, hey, we recommend if you're going to build this character out, do this background. You don't have to, but we recommend it. For those, they do recommend there is like a Jedi or Sith background to kind of get you more aligned with one of the Force, like sides of the Force there. And I think there's also like a gray kind of middle groundy one. But there's nothing to say you couldn't do like a bounty hunter. So I could say build a Sith, you know, build a more charisma based, let's say Guardian, because I want to smite shit, you know, but excuse me, force empowered strike shit. But I also want a bounty hunt. Cool. I can take the bounty hunter background. There are different, you know, feats that come with it. There's all these I can get too. You get nice features from it as well. You know, deception, you know, for this one, you get to choose, you know, proficient, be 2 different skills, be it deception, insight, persuasion, or stealth. You get a tool proficiency, and demolitions kit, security kit, or slicers kit. You gain a language, and you also get some clothes and some extra cash. So these are all really cool, and they add a lot of flexibility. I really, really like the background feat portion of it. It gives you another little stat boost to your PCs. It also gives you other little knickknacks to add on, like a lot of the feats do, and you get it innately when you're building the character. It's like almost like a free feat based off of whatever you're trying to build. They also have potentially like, I guess you'd call it like planets or races based off of them. So like bounty hunters one. So I know like a lot of people in their head might be like, I want to build like Jango Fett, or I want to build Boba Fett. You know, I want to build a like frontliney, tanky bounty hunter guy. And you could do that. So you pick a fighter, you could do bounty hunter, but also if you wanted to, you could build a Mandalorian instead, you know. So you're a child of Mandalore basically. And you can do that instead of doing bounty hunter. So maybe I don't want to be a bounty hunter. Maybe I want to just be a Mandalorian. That's not a bounty hunter, but just like they're a toughened warrior. Maybe they're an ex-Mandalorian soldier. They're not a bounty hunter going around trying to catch like criminals and assassinate people. But maybe they're like a mercenary gun for hire sort of thing. But they want to I want a Mandalorian. Cool. You can take that. You know, there's a Mandalorian clan you can pick or not choose not to pick. You get a feature, you get a background feat, all kinds of cool stuff. I really, really, really like this addition to this system. Like, this is not standard 5th edition stuff. It's something extra added on. I really like to give out a free feat. I think it adds a lot of flavor and it gives your players get excited too. So this is a really cool addition to this system compared to like 5e, and I really, really enjoy it. Let's jump to the Starships of the Galaxies. This is all your content in here is going to be about like your starship combat and stuff like that, how to run ships, all the equipment that goes into them and all that, what the ability scores mean, differences between ship sizes. A lot of this is useful. The problem is that this does not contain actual stat blocks for certain things. So there's not like an X-Wing stat block in here. There are recommendations for it. So like, for example, let's go to Tiny Starship. So they're like, you know, there's a whole page on it, but it's like, this is like what we recommend basically. So like, you know, for ability score adjustments, your Tiny Starfighters will have a +4 to their dex, a -4 to their con. Their hull points will be a D4. You know, and it's all listed here. The thing is, you kind of have to build it out yourself. You kind of have to decide what is what. So like, I guess more like tiny fighters are going to be like droid starfighters because there's no cockpit in them. So they're a little bit more compact. Whereas like small ships have a tendency to be like X-Wings and TIE fighters and stuff like that. And they all come with features, but you do have to build out the ship stat block itself if it's like if you're not using one that's found online. There are ones available online. I don't know if the Google Drive links are still up. There are out there though, and they kind of give like explanations for stuff, and they give stat blocks, and they're usually pretty balanced, but it is a lot to kind of take in and try to handle. So I did not get too deep into the starship combat. I did a little bit, and because like part of the starship combat is not only like the stat block of the ship, but also all the PCs get like a deployment. They start earning deployments and stuff. So you have like a gunner. So let's pull up a gunner real quick. So gunner is like somebody who's really good at using like, you know, the cannons on the Millennium Falcon. Like if anybody's seen A New Hope, where they're sitting there on the turrets firing at the TIE fighters after they escape the Death Star, like that would be like what a gunner does kind of thing. Like that's their whole thing. There's like a pilot, there's like technicians who are like running around repairing the ship and trying to shunt power around when you're in combat because you have like power dice tied to your ships and shield points you're trying to regenerate. Maybe you're trying to repair the hull because somebody blew a hole in it or something. Like there's a lot, and these deployments come with things that you can use power dice for, which are things that are innate to every ship. On top of that, you get styles or like special abilities. It can get very confusing when you're trying to run not only a PC that has like its own class in it, so your fighter, rogue, operative, scout, scholar, whatever, but also at the same time you're like, oh, I'm also getting a deployment in gunner and I'm getting really good at that and I'm getting these things. So it's like a whole second character sheet you have almost, on top of the fact that you also have a character sheet for the ship itself. So it can be a lot. When I personally ran Starship Combat, I thought the rules were very confusing, and maybe it was just me not getting it, but I opted to not do the like board with hexes or grid or anything like that, just because it got very confusing. Like the ships have like a massive amount of movement. A lot of them have like 300 plus feet of movement, plus they have a turning speed. And so trying to like do the math, and like when you're playing on Foundry, a multiple 100-foot map is huge, and it was very confusing for my players because they have to sit there and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in to try to figure out like where the fuck the ship was and everything. So what I usually did is I would maybe have a map. Well, I usually did a lot of theater of the mind stuff. So it's like, okay, you guys escape from the space station. You're being trailed by a number of TIE fighters. Let's roll a quick initiative real quick. See who gets to go first. Like, oh, you guys won? Cool. You guys get to fire first. The TIE fighters figure out what you can do. Like pilot would be like, I want to take evasive maneuvers, make us harder to hit. Cool, done. Let's do like a piloting check. You know, everybody's on a gun. They'll take shots out, try to take out some TIE fighters. You know, I usually made the TIE fighters like a one shot because historically in the movies and stuff, they just get hit once and they're just blown up. They're not like tanking shots. And sometimes you don't do a ton of damage with the shots. And so you have a TIE fighter that's just tanking rounds. So that's how I did it. And I found it ran better. My players tended to like to focus on RPing more and the ground combat. So that's kind of what we focused on. It's a little sad because I think one of the cooler parts of Star Wars is the starship combat. And unfortunately, the starship combat in this was quite confusing. Let's jump onto Wretched Hives. And again, all these books, by the way, all have really beautiful artwork in them. Really, really well done. This one has a lot of like downtime activities you could do, how to like, you know, build stuff. It has a lot of, you know, way to enhance stuff, droid customization options, cybernetics, if that's something you wanted to do. I know they don't touch on it a ton in the Star Wars universe, but it is definitely a thing. And these are, it's like out of Xanthar's, or I think Tasha's had a little bit of it, but I know Xanthar's definitely had like downtime stuff you could do. The DMG does as well, but Xanthar's really expanded on it. And this is basically akin to Xanthar's. Without you rolling for the DC, you kind of like figure the DC out yourself as the DM. But yeah, this is how it rolls. There's complications. You can earn money. I did this quite a bit when I was doing my campaign because ours was like a week to week. I almost ran, like, if anybody's played Cyberpunk, it's like Cyberpunk where like they get pulled together for a job, and that's how I ran it. And so that's like in between that, they'd have time to do things, and kind of that's how we grew and expanded on the world. Was they'd be like, I'm gonna go to the fighting pits, and they make an enemy at the fighting pit. So maybe when they're traveling around town, some dude from the fighting pit shows up, like something out of the Nemesis system from, you know, Shadow of War or something like that, and it's like, oh, bounty hunter, fuck you, friend, and then like tries to kill him. But a lot of downtime in here. This is a really good companion book. I love it. Let's jump on to Scum and Villainy. This is your monster manual. This has a ton of different stat blocks in it. This is really good artwork, a lot of different stat blocks. A ton of people worked on it. They're really well balanced. They give you, you know, powers and abilities. They give you what the fuck these things do. You know, you've got, you know, the, let's say like the Acolyte here, which is, if anybody's seen Clone Wars, or not Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, when Obi-Wan and Anakin and Padme are in the Geonosian arena, this is one of the things that's going to execute them. And they've got a whole stat block for it. These are exactly like stat blocks from 5e. You've got your size, its alignment, you know, armor class, hit points, speed, all of its stats. What's its senses? What's its language? What's its challenge rating? Special things it can do? What's its actions? All that's in here. These are really good. They range from everything from monsters to humanoids to droids to vehicles sometimes. Like there are stats in here for like an ATST in case you want your players to fight an ATST. You know, you've got the assassin droids, various astromechs and stuff like that. There are tons of stuff in here. Really, really good. Highly recommend it. A lot of beautiful artwork in here as well. You know, different variances like on some of these creatures and stuff like that. And it's stuff like you'll know, and sometimes stuff you won't know, or maybe if you like read legends or stuff like that, you might know some of these creatures. I think that's an actual stink bug. You got stuff like porgs, and it's everything from Old Republic like era enemies to, so you'll have like Old Republic troopers, I think troopers are a generic one, but they have like some Sith, like your more generic Sith. They have Inquisitors if you're doing something around like the, you know, sequel trilogy, or not sequel trilogy, the original trilogy, when like, you know, Vader had Inquisitors running around, so stuff out of like Jedi Fallen Order and stuff like that. You've got stuff from the sequel trilogy, obviously, like the porgs here. Like it's all over the place, and so you can mix and match these as a DM, which is nice. So you can be like, you know, porg could be a something else, you know, if you don't want to use porg, or if like you're looking at like let's pull up like yeah, so they even got factions in here too. So you've got like Galactic Army, so you've got like trooper captain, squad of troopers, which is like a swarm. Your various like flame troopers, headhunters, heavy troopers, jetpack troopers, all this kind of stuff's in there. We've got purge troopers. So this is stuff that kind of like, I think it first premiered in either like the Rebels TV show or in like Jedi Fallen Order and stuff like that. Let's see, pro droids, got rack ghouls. So if you have played Knights of the Old Republic, you know what rack ghouls are. Very horrifying. They were in the subterranean level on Taurus. They're weird virus infected humanoids that try to bite and rip people apart and basically turn them into rack ghouls, kind of like zombies. Let's see what else we got here. We've got to have, we not have, oh, maybe there aren't Sith stat blocks in here. A lot of stuff in here though, and this it'll range everything alphabetically or by challenge rating. I use the by challenge rating quite a bit because there's not like a generator out there to help kind of put an encounter together for you. So I could like look at this and kind of pull my stuff together when I was DMing this. But they've got stuff all over the place. There's stat blocks for everything in here, from just standard humanoids to military to assassins to monsters, vehicles, all that, like here, yeah, light force wielders. You've got seers, sages, padawans. You've got dark-sided stuff, so you've everything from like a juggernaut here, dark lord, all kinds of stuff like that. I wanted to show off Foundry Tabletop just a little bit here. It is something that I utilized to play this. I highly recommend it if you're gonna something digital, either Roll20 or this. I liked this one because there is a compendium built in. I'll show you guys that in a little bit. Foundry is a virtual tabletop. They do a monthly subscription if you'd like, or for I believe it was $50. You can get a permanent license for it. And you can either port forward and let people join in, or you can rent a server, whatever floats your boat. There are ways to build like player PCs out here, you know, everything from backgrounds to archetypes to classes, class features, powers, and all that is in here. So you can, you know, pull up various force powers and what they do and what, you know, properties are with them. This system allows you to pull maps in and stuff like that. It has, you know, music to your players and stuff like that. It's a really nice way to play. I highly recommend it, just because it digitizes everything. As your players are building out their characters, they can like work on stuff and get stuff added on. So like you like tell them, hey, you got to level up. They can sit there and level up, and they're like, they've got John Jedi here, and we're gonna like level them up. So we're gonna go here, and you can go level 2. And it'll walk you through it. Do you want to roll for it? Cool. Roll. Cool. Next, and it'll say, hey, you get this, like force empowered strikes. So basically you get smite, you get a fighting style and stuff like that. So you'll need to pick one. So part of this they do need the book for, but like it does kind of walk them through like, hey, this is what you're getting. You know, focus strikes are 2d8. It pulls it in here. Like a lot of this info is available for you, which is cool. And it has all of your information here. So it's got your hit die, your hit points, your hit dice, what your initiative is, your movement and stuff like that. You can pull stuff like the various species from the book. So we can pull that in, and it will also update things. Do that before you're leveling up your character, by the way. Always start with like your stat block and then pull in your like species and whatnot, and then your background and your class and everything. Super good. I really like it. This is how I played, just because there's a lot of features in here. There's a nice compendium browser to help pull up like equipment and stuff like that, which there is an ungodly amount of equipment in this. It has a monster manual in it as well, so we can pull up monsters. For example, we've got Fisto's Codex here, which is an add-on monster manual. This has a lot of like Sith stuff. So you have like, for example, Sith Cyborg, which is definitely not Darth Vader. He's in here. I chucked this at my players during a one-shot once. It was absolutely hysterical to watch them freak out when Darth Vader like Kool-Aid manned through a wall and was just like trying to murder them. They like snuck onto a Star Destroyer in a one-shot. I loved it. They loved it. It was great. Like they were trying to get onto their ship to get off of the Star Destroyer, and basically Darth Vader's just slow walking, like not getting fucked up in any way, shape, or form by them, until one of them got on like a ship and hit him with like a blaster cannon, and like finally did like a good chunk of damage to his health. It was wild. It was cool. There's stat blocks in here though that are really nice, including stuff that's not only like from the standard monster manual, but also from some of the add-ons like Fisto's Codex and stuff like that, which are like additional content for you to play with. So if you're going to play it, I recommend something like Foundry or Roll20, just because it's a little bit easier, I think, to work with. Otherwise, you're going to be printing out stuff or working off of PDFs. But yeah, let's jump to the verdict at this point. I think we've kind of shown off stuff. Overall verdict, I highly recommend the Star Wars 5th edition system. At the very least, I would give it a try. Highly recommend running this on a virtual tabletop system out there, as there may be resources available to make DMing easier. You cannot go wrong, of course, with the low cost of fucking free. So highly recommend it there.